Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. I would like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, TSTV channel 347. Of course, today's episode is going to be dedicated to what is happening, of course, in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. Well, we're going to start at home. And activists who were taking part in the global march to Gaza had been violently blocked by Egyptian authorities as they attempted to make their way to the Rafah border crossing with Gaza. Now, here in South Africa, the Egypt Action Coalition has called on Egypt to use its sovereignty in trying to go ahead and allow for this convoy to make its way into the Rafah border so that aid can be given. Remember, there's currently a blockade that is happening by the Israeli occupation forces in not allowing any aid to go through. Joining me now, I'd like to welcome, who is part of the Egypt Action Coalition, and is also the chairperson of the Palestine Solidarity Alliance here in South Africa, Nazeem Adam. Nazeem, always a pleasure having you on. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good to be with Hilaal TV. Thanks.
Nazeem, I think one of those demands, of course, the sovereignty that Egypt needs to exercise. And this is what a lot of the activists on the ground had been speaking about. This is the frustrating part, isn't it? That instead of using that sovereignty, they're using brutal force against these very same protesters and activists.
Yeah, no, it's, unfortunately, and it's not just Egypt, I think it's many of the neighboring countries, Jordan, the Arab states, they would suppress any kind of support for the Palestinian people. We've seen that. You go to Makkah, you can't even wear a keffiyeh, and then you called in for questioning. So the Arab regimes, Egypt is one of them, is totally afraid, I think, more of their own people than anything else, and they fear that the uprising and the resistance in Gaza is an exposure of their hypocrisy, of their double standards, of their failure to serve humanity, of their failure to serve the Ummah. And this puts them in a very precarious position as despots. And that is why you see them bringing out the heavy hand of the state apparatus, the military, the police, the intelligence services. All of this was mobilized by the Egyptians the moment we announced for the march to Gaza, which correlated with our flotilla, which had just been captured a day or so before, and in the week preceding that. And we see then that they not only is the Egyptian regime failing to support the victims of a genocide and fulfilling its responsibility, or as part of the United Nations and the African Union to assist those people whose rights are being violated. The reluctancy to do that is one thing, but then to stop civilian organizations, peace-loving organizations, tens of thousands of people ready to make their way to the Gaza border to lend support to the victims of this merciless Israeli assault and humanitarian crisis, man-made starvation. Even they were stopped by the Egyptians. And like I say, it's more a sense of their own fear, of their own insecurities, because that mobilization of the Gaza March would have mobilized the Egyptian people as well, in terms of taking a stand and forcing their government to do more. And to be frank, for us, it's what we have to do as well. Our government is also not doing enough. We know that there's a coal ship from South Africa that's going to dock in Egypt. In Israel, South African coal is firing the energy system of Israel. So we all internationally, the global south in particular, the civilian population, the NGOs within the Arab world, within the African states, in the global south generally, we have to raise our voices and force our governments to do more. And the call now for the total expulsion of the Israeli embassy is long overdue, and we need our government to put their money where their mouth is It's great that we went to the ICJ. Now let's act on the rulings of the ICJ, which said there is a plausible genocide. And that comes with responsibilities, which means that states that are part of the United Nations, part of the ICJ and the ICC, have to act on the rulings of that court, but also on our own moral conscience.
Yeah, well, Nazeem, of course, the embassy, Ronald Lamola, has commented it's not cut and dry when it comes to that. But I just want to stick on what has happened in Egypt. So, on one hand, Nazeem, you had authorities, security forces of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's regime in Egypt, of course, blocking members, deporting some members, taking members in for questioning. And then there were reports on the ground that thugs, and I'm going to say quote unquote thugs or paid members, were there on the ground to go ahead and make life difficult for these activists. So it makes life difficult, doesn't it, that you've got the security forces of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and then you've got, if reports are correct, these thugs that are being paid to go ahead and attack the convoy. It just speaks that the heavy-handedness of the Egyptian government at this time is not really making things any easy.
No, of course not. And we look at avenues where we can peacefully go through and lend our support to the Palestinian people. And I'm sure if there was an opening, tens of thousands of people would go immediately to Gaza to lend support. We know that there are doctors that are still managing to go in with some relief agency with much difficulty and limited resources. So there are some humanitarian aid groups, but now that with the total militarization of humanitarian aid and the Gaza Relief Fund, that too is being blocked. But should the Egyptian regime, should Sisi have allowed, I think we would have seen those numbers in the convoy quadruple overnight, because there were many people who wanted to go through, many people in Egypt, many people in North Africa, in Europe, which is closer, who would have made their way in to go and do what is, I think, the best form of solidarity, and that is people-to-people solidarity. And Sisi blocked this with his heavy-handedness that we know he uses in terms of all opposition, and also to please his paymasters, which is the United States and Israel. In fact, the sentiment is that he was instructed by Israel to block this convoy by any and all means necessary. Logistically, it was always going to be a nightmare. Firstly, you needed to get through the border crossings, whether at the airport or if those who came by land, and there were security forces and military forces there blocking people already. Some of the neighboring states themselves blocking the convoy. And then once they got into Cairo, some of them were caught in for questioning and then released, and then they got to their hotels. But it was a total police state while they were there. The hotels were monitored, guarded, full police presence. The repressive apparatus of the state was in full force, and then managed to, through social media, WhatsApp and so forth, regather, and then the convoy managed to get to would have been a random checkpoint on en route towards Rafah. And this is where then they stopped all the people making their way out of Cairo into Rafah, and that's where they were held. And this is where we saw these atrocities committed by the state police and the aggressive forces of Sisi, but also by the gangs and the thugs that were the criminal elements, which we know have always had a hand-in-hand relationship with the state apparatus. Remember that the criminal element, their best friend is always within the state police system, right? Any country, they try and make good allies there. And so this is what they used. We've been seeing the similar thing in Gaza with the Israeli Defense Force using the very strong criminal element, branding them even as ISIS, and they were the ones that were extorting people for relief food that they were capturing and taking off the trucks under the guise of the IDF. Similarly, we saw the similar pattern with the Egyptian police working hand in hand with the Egyptian criminal elements.
Nazeem, one final question because we just got 2 minutes. Sovereignty. A lot of the discussion has been Egypt needs to practice its sovereignty. It's mentioned in your statement also. It's going to be hard, isn't it, given that if we listen to many reports, this is Israel's hand in telling Egypt, you're going to stop this from happening no matter what cost.
Yeah, let's accept that there is no sovereignty when it comes to Egypt. They may be able to do some local government work on their own, but they are so dependent on the aid and the grants from the United States and totally under the control of the Israelis. I think there is also an element that they don't want to see themselves in the same kind of trajectory that we saw Lebanon and Syria with the relentless bombings by Israel. But by and large, they have capitulated and they are complicit in the genocide that we're seeing unfold there. We know that Egypt is trying to hold out not to fall for the Trump plan of having the ethnic cleansing of Gaza happen and receiving all of those Palestinians that are now in absolute destitute situation. And we've seen a similar thing in the West Bank, homes demolished and Palestinians being subjected to harsh realities of this colonial force. You know that yesterday a major law was passed where even if you have evidence that you are the owners of the land, now there's laws which allow settlers to claim your land, sort of quasi-legal framework that they've created, which means much more Palestinian land is going to be lost. I think they put in the final push, and they are being supported by these neighboring states, and that just shows that they are not sovereign. They cannot send a glass of water into Gaza, let alone take on the might of the or use the might of their armies. And they have very big, strong military forces, but too afraid, I think, to take a stand for justice.
Nazeem, always a pleasure having you on. Jazakallah so much for joining us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All the best with all of your shows, Faraz. Thank you.
Ameen. Chairperson of the Palestine Solidarity Alliance here in South Africa, Nazeem Adam. Up next, we're staying in the Middle East. Of course, Iran and Israel. That fighting continues to happen. I'm going to be speaking to Hassan Seria with regards to that. Do stay tuned.